All right, everyone. So in this lesson, I'm going to be talking about my scaling toolkit for Facebook ads. And by toolkit, I mean all of the different strategies and types of campaigns and campaign structure that I use to scale. And so this is going to be a very insightful lesson for you guys, I think. And I'm going to be showing you diagrams of all the different campaign types that I use to scale and so on. And then I'm going to be showing you real examples inside of Ads Manager as well. And so without further ado, let's just get right into the content. All right, so first off, just a quick introduction about this lesson. So earlier in this module, I talked about sandbox testing campaigns and how you want to keep your sandbox testing campaigns separate from scaling campaigns. And so I already covered the sandbox testing part, and now I'm going to talk about the scaling campaigns part. And so you want to keep these separate. And so in this lesson, I'm going to be sharing my formulas for scaling campaigns that I've been using and that work really well for me. And so these are campaigns that you just let them run. They optimize because they have a high budget, and so you just let them run and optimize. And it requires very little management because the Facebook algorithm will distribute your budget across the proven audiences and ads optimally in real time, right? So inside of your scaling campaigns, you only have proven audiences and you have your top creatives. And so Facebook is going to decide which audiences to spend to, and then within those audiences, it's going to decide which ads to spend to, and all of this in real time. And so these scaling campaigns are really powerful because they have a lot of budget. You just let them optimize, and Facebook decides everything for you. It decides who is the best people to target today, what's the best ad today, and so on. And this obviously works a lot better at high budget. And so this is why I only recommend doing this for the scaling campaigns. And for the sandbox campaigns, you don't care about the optimization. You're just testing different things. You can pause ad sets, you can duplicate, you can increase budgets, you can do whatever you want in a sandbox campaign. But for scaling campaigns, you want to let it run at high budget and let it optimize. Now, before I dive into the actual toolkit showing you all the different type of campaigns that I use, I just want to cover some best practices that apply to all different types of scaling campaigns. So it doesn't matter what type of scaling campaign you're doing. These are just some best practices that apply to all types of scaling campaigns. So when you're starting a scaling campaign, you want to start it with at least a budget of 20 times your profit target cost per purchase. So you can get this number from your KPI spreadsheet that I talked about in the reading data lesson. And so 20 times your profit target cost per purchase. So let's say you're aiming for a $20 cost per purchase. You want to start the campaign at least $400 budget per day. And so those are scaling campaigns, right? So you're only trying to scale proven audiences, proven interest, and so you shouldn't be too worried about starting at a higher budget because that'll just give Facebook the best chance at optimizing. So you only want to attempt to scale proven audiences and creatives. I've already talked about this. One-day click optimization if the price is under $50. Otherwise, just leave it to default. And I put here value optimization if possible. I'm going to be talking about this a little bit more later in this lesson. But some people will have access to value optimization, and this works well. This works really well if you have access to it. Now, the optimal amounts of ad sets for scaling per campaign is 3 to 6 ad sets in my experience. So I don't try to make a scaling campaign with less than 3 ad sets, and I usually don't go over 6 active ad sets at one time for one of my scaling campaigns. And usually I just try to leave it at 5. 5 is like the sweet spot. Broad audiences work best for scaling. So 5 mil plus is what I wrote, all the way to 100 mil plus, depending on how broad your product is. But broad audiences work best for scaling. So if you have small audiences, for example, interest audiences or lookalike audiences, you can group them together in one ad set to create a larger audience. You also want to try to have similar size audiences in the one campaign. This is because of campaign budget optimization. If you don't have similar size audiences in the campaign, for example, if you have an audience that's like 50 million and then you have one that's 5 million, Facebook has a tendency to spend way more towards the larger audiences. And so most of the spend is going to go towards the audience with 50 million. And so that's why I prefer to have similar size audiences in the one campaign. You want to let Facebook optimize. Don't pause ad sets unless you have a lot of data. So, you're only trying to scale proven ad sets. And so all the ad sets in your scaling campaigns, you should have tested them beforehand. And so don't pause them, just let it optimize. And usually what happens is when you zoom out, the more you zoom out, let's say you look at the last 30 days, usually every single ad set is going to be profitable because Facebook eventually learns when it should spend on which ad set, and so it won't spend unless it thinks that it can get you a good return on ad spend. And so let Facebook optimize and, zoom out, like look at a lot of data, like last 30 days or something, if you want to see what CBO is doing, and you'll see that it's doing a good job most of the time. When the performance declines for your scaling campaigns, the best thing to do in my experience is cycle in new creatives, add in new creatives. So for example, you could test new creative variations, similar to your current best creative, right? You could take your best creative, test like 5 new scroll stoppers or 5 new ad copies, take the top 1 to 2 ads out of that sandbox campaign test, add that to all of your ad sets inside of the scaling campaigns. This will reset the learning phase for your scaling campaigns, and maybe the new ad will do well, and so it gives kind of your campaign a fresh start to do better. And so this is what I do when my performance starts to really decline. Make sure that you look at least 3 days data, right? Like if your performance is bad one day, you don't need to panic and do anything. But if your performance is actually declining over time, it's time for you to cycle some new creatives in. And so test some in your creative sandbox and then add the top ones into all ad sets of your scaling campaigns. And I wrote here, when you cycle in new ads, you want to pause bad ads. So you don't want to have too many ads per ad set. So my sweet spot is 3 to 6 active ads per ad set inside of my scaling campaigns. And so if I already had like 6 active ads and then I add 2 new ones, then I'm going to pause at least the 2 worst ones and then maybe a few more. And so that's what I mean by cycling ads. I always do this when performance starts dropping, and this is how I'm able to stay very consistent with one campaign. Like one scaling campaign over a long time can be very, very consistent if you just keep cycling new ads. All right, so now we can get to the interesting stuff, which is the actual formulas for my scaling campaigns. So the first one is top interest scaling. So for this, what you want to do is you want to test single interest in an audience sandbox campaign. And this is already part of the launch strategy, right? In the launch strategy, I tell you to test at least 10 single interests. And then you want to keep testing new interests similar to the top performers and narrow down the best ones by demographics. So for example, if you have an ad set that's doing really well and most of the sales are coming profitably from 35 plus or something, then you can narrow down to that. And then you can also test similar interests to that one, right? So keep expanding horizontally on interests and narrowing them down, finding new profitable interests until you have 5 plus consistently profitable ad sets. And by consistently profitable ad sets, I mean at least over 2 to 3 days and at least 10 sales. So you don't want to try to scale too early. It's much better to just like be patient and make sure that all of the ad sets are actually like consistently profitable. It's not just random sales. And then at that point, you should attempt to scale. And so once you have 5 plus consistently profitable ad sets with at least 10 sales, you want to duplicate them into a new top interest scaling campaign. And I'm going to show you a diagram for that campaign right here. So this is what it looks like. So campaign top interest. This is website conversions purchase. The starting budget is 20 times your profit target cost per purchase minimum. So if you have a $20 target cost per purchase, the starting budget would be $400 minimum. Now, let's say that you have 5 top interests, right? So let's say you had 5 consistently profitable ad sets with more than 10 sales each, and these are the ones that you used for your top interest scaling. So you select all 5, you duplicate them into this new top interest campaign right here. And so ad set number 1 would be the first top interest. You want to target the top 4 countries: US, UK, Canada, Australia, or all the e-packet countries. This is up to you. But if you really want to scale, the best is ePacket, right? Because this is the broadest audience. So if you want to scale, use ePacket. If you're still just getting started, kind of, and you want the maximum profitability, then the T4 is probably best. And then, so this is just your top interest number 1. So you want to select that interest, narrow it down to your target age group, gender, if necessary, right? Like if in the sandbox campaign you had narrowed that down, you want to leave that narrowed down. But you also want to make it as broad as possible. So for example, if you're narrowing down by age, you want to keep the age range that you're narrowing down by as broad as possible within the realm of profitability. Now, for placements, you just want to do auto placements. For your optimization, you just want to do 1-day click optimization if the selling price is under 50. Otherwise, just the default 7-day click, 1-day view. And so this is what an ad set's going to look like, and then the other ones are just the same thing, but you select a different interest, right? And everything else is the same. Now for the exclusions for each one of these, you want to exclude website visitors because we're already retargeting those with our retargeting campaign, and then you want to exclude purchasers because you don't want to keep targeting people who've already bought from you, right? Especially if they haven't gotten the product yet, that's not good. They're going to comment and be upset about that. And so this is what the top interest scaling campaign looks like. like there's not necessarily 5 top interests, right? You can have 3 to 6 active at one time. But this is what the general structure looks like. And then, yeah, that's all you need to do. And then once, like if some of these ad sets start performing poorly over time, like if an interest dies out, you can pause it and then replace it with a new interest from your sandbox campaign. All right, so I want to show you a real example of a top interest scaling campaign. So here's one right here. I'm just going to filter by selection just to look at that one only. And you can see this is the last 3 months selected. And so as you can see, I've spent $110,000 on this campaign to generate a 1.99 return, which is really good for this brand because the break even is like 1.5. And so, yeah, this is just the same campaign. You don't have to like duplicate. You don't have to constantly pause or anything. You just let Facebook do its thing. And this campaign has been running for a while now, for over 3 months profitably. And let's take a look inside. So I'm not going to be showing you the interest ad sets because I don't want to reveal my targeting for this brand. However, you can see that most of those sales came from just three interest ad sets here, right? And then if I scroll down, you'll see that in total there's there's 5, like 10, like probably like 15 total interests in here. But most of the sales came from just these 5 here. Some of these are just interests that I tried to scale, and then after spending like 1,000 or 2, I decided to pause it because it wasn't doing as well. And then these are the main top interests that I've just been scaling continuously. I don't even have to touch this campaign almost ever. All I do is I just let it run and I cycle creatives. And so this is the idea with these scaling campaigns, is that you let Facebook do all the work. You put multiple creatives per ad set and you just let it optimize, and you don't have to spend that much time optimizing your ads every day. All right, so the next formula is just single lookalike audience scaling. So this is just a regular lookalike audience campaign with a single lookalike audience type. So for example, in the launch strategy, when you launched the 95% video viewers lookalike audience campaign, that was a single lookalike audience campaign. And you can use these campaigns to scale. If it's doing really well, you can just scale it by increasing the budget. And I'm going to talk about how to scale, like how to increase the budget later in this lesson. But you can scale single lookalike audiences. It works well because it's equal size audiences, right? You have 5 segments of the lookalike audience. They all have the exact same size, and there's no overlap whatsoever. And so this is really good for the Facebook optimization because it can thrive in an environment like this with equal size audiences and no overlap. And so it's really able to decide which is the best segment to spend on. And so this works well. If your single lookalike audience campaign is profitable, then you can start scaling that, and usually it works well. Audiences, the only downside is that audiences can get fatigued fast, right? If you remember the best practices at the start of the video, I told you that broad audiences work best, and I said over 5 million, right? And a 1% lookalike is about 2 million for the United States, and if you do all 4 countries here, it's going to be like 5 million or so, I think. So it's good. It's a good audience size, but if you really want to scale aggressively, these audiences can get fatigued fast, and so that's where super lookalikes come in, and I'm going to be talking about that next. Now the next formula is super lookalikes. And so this is basically combining 2 to 3 lookalikes into one to create a super lookalike. And as you said, recall that broad audiences work best. And so, this is basically just combining lookalikes to create larger lookalikes and then running that. And you can do this instead of having like multiple single lookalike audience campaigns. You can just combine it into one super lookalike audience campaign that avoids overlap, and it creates like more broad audiences that you can work with. And so this works really, really well. This is like my favorite way to scale. And I definitely recommend you give it a try once you have enough data. And so ideally you should run a lookalike audience sandbox campaign to test all of your lookalike audience types. And so you can use just the 1% lookalike audience, and then you can put them all into an audience sandbox campaign the same way that I showed you like how to structure an interest sandbox campaign with the minimum spend limits. You can do the exact same thing with the 1% lookalikes, and then based on what performs best in there, you can stack the top 3 lookalike audience types. So for example, if you tested all the different lookalike audience types, and there's a ton of different ones you can test. You can test on top of my head 95% video viewers. You can test website visitors, top visitors by time spent, add to cart, initiate checkout, purchasers, like page engagers, like all these different things. You want to test all of this and then see which lookalike audiences perform the best for you. And so, for example, if you tested all of them and then your purchase lookalikes, your add to cart lookalikes, and your website visitors lookalikes do very well, then these are the three that you'd want to combine for your super lookalike audience. And so what you're going to do is you're going to put the purchase, the 1% purchase lookalike with the 1% add to cart and the 1% website visitors. You put all of these together in one ad set. This would be your first ad set. You put all the 1 to 2% together in one ad set. This would be your second ad set, all the way to 4 to 5%. And so this is the same thing essentially as a single lookalike audience campaign, but you're putting 3 of them together to create larger audiences. And so let me show you this diagram here. And so it gets a little confusing with the exclusions here, so I'm going to explain that in a second. So the campaign is super lookalike. This is just an example. Let's say that you're using purchase, add to cart, and website visitors lookalikes for the super lookalike. The optimization goal is website conversions purchase. And the starting budget, same thing, 20 times your profit target cost per purchase minimum. Now you have 5 ad sets here. And so ad set number 1 is the super lookalike 1%. And so when you're creating your lookalikes, you want to use the US, UK, Canada, Australia, or all of ePacket. All of ePacket is best when you have a lot of data. When you're just starting out, I recommend these 4. And so you want to select the 3 lookalike audiences. You want to select purchase 1%, add to cart 1%, website visitors 1%. Leave everything else broad. You don't want to narrow it down by age or by location. You want to leave everything broad. Automatic placements. 1-day click optimization if your selling price is under $50. Otherwise, the default 7-day click, 1-day view. And so for the exclusions here, you just want to exclude website visitors and purchase in the last 30 days. We don't want to retarget purchasers once again. And lookalikes, if you don't exclude purchasers, often it will retarget existing purchasers. So you definitely want to exclude purchasers from your lookalikes. Now, the ad set number 2 is the exact same thing. So it's the super lookalike 1 to 2%. So you select the 1 to 2% lookalikes, leave everything else broad. Everything here is the same. The only difference is that you have to exclude all of the audiences that you included here. And so you want to exclude the 1% here, right? Because the per 1 to 2% won't overlap with per 1%, but it might overlap with add to cart 1% and website visitors 1%. And so this is something that you need to keep in mind when you're stacking multiple lookalikes, is you want to exclude everything properly. And so this is I'm showing you the exact way to do it. So these are the exclusions for the second one. You want to exclude the 1%. And then for the third ad set, it's the exact same thing. You select the 2 to 3%, leave everything else broad. And then the exclusions are the same. And then you're just adding on the 1 to 2%, right? And then same thing with ad set number 4. It's the 3 to 4% one. Everything else is the same. And then you're adding on the 2 to 3% in the exclusions. And then last thing for ad set number 5, same thing for ad set number 5, you exclude the 3 to 4% as well. So, each ad set gets more and more exclusions. This is just to avoid any overlap whatsoever. And then if you set it up this way, you're going to have 5 ad sets that have very similar audience sizes. They're not going to have the exact same, but they're going to have very similar audience sizes. And there's going to be no overlap whatsoever. And you're going to be targeting everyone. And so this is a really great setup for super lookalikes. This is what I do for my super lookalikes. And then inside of each ad set, you're going to have multiple ads, as I've mentioned previously. And so I'm going to hop into Ads Manager to show you an example of super lookalikes. All right, so I'm back inside of Ads Manager, and let's take a look at the super lookalike. So I'm back. I'm selecting the same time range as before, the last 3 months, and I'm sorting by amount spent. And you can see that by far the most of my budget went into super lookalike. So this is what I was saying. This is my favorite type of campaign to scale with. It works really well. I've been able to spend $143,000 on just this one campaign, right? This is over a third of my budget on just one campaign, and I barely touch it. So let's take a look inside. So you can see it's literally just 5 ad sets, right? And I've never paused any of these ad sets. And let me show you what I was saying about the how CBO works. So you can see that all of them are profitable, right? That's why I don't pause any ad sets. If you look into any specific day, there's probably going to be 2 or 3 that are not profitable, or that they're not even spending at all. But if you zoom out, all of them are profitable, and this is what CBO does. And so this is why the strategy works really well. You can see the best one by far was the 1% lookalike, but then followed by the 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and then 1 to 2. So it didn't follow the exact order, but it was pretty close. And yeah, like I said, I don't pause any ad sets. I just let this run and I cycle new ads. And this is all I do. And you can see it does really well. You can spend a lot on a campaign like this without it getting too exhausted yet, right? Lifetime for this audience is only at 2.0 frequency, which isn't so bad for lifetime frequency, right? like each person that I've targeted has seen my ads twice only. And so I can probably keep scaling this for a long time, given that I just keep cycling in new creatives. Right, so another cool type of campaign that you can use for scaling is value-based super lookalikes. And so this is the exact same thing as super lookalikes like I just showed you here, but using value-based lookalikes. And so value-based lookalikes, it uses the value on your pixel. So like when someone buys, Facebook knows that they bought, but they also know how, like what they bought, like how many items and what the value of the purchase was. And so using value-based lookalikes, Facebook looks for people that are likely to spend a lot on your website. And so value-based lookalikes work really well, and they also work best with value optimization. And that's what I wrote here. Once you have a lot of purchases on your pixel, you unlock value optimization. And I think it's at around 500 purchases. I'm not sure, but for the new store that I was working on with the case study, the 2.0 case study that I'm going to be talking about in the next module, I unlocked value optimization once I hit about 500 purchases. And it's not available to all advertisers yet, because for that other brand that I showed you, that I've spent hundreds of thousands on, I still don't have value optimization. And so I'm not 100% sure how they're rolling this out yet, but if you have value optimization, it works well, and it works best with value-based lookalikes. And so you can combine value optimization with value-based lookalikes and the super LLA, like the super lookalike strategy, and this is what you get: value-based super lookalikes. And so there's 4 different types of value-based lookalikes. There's purchase value, add to cart value, initiate checkout value, and view content value. And so you can just create a super lookalike with all 4, or just like the top 2 to 3 if you want to test all of them, and then pick the top 2 to 3. And then you select website conversions campaign, and then you select value at the ad set level as your optimization. All right, so another one of the scaling campaigns that I use, I like to call it demos, and this is just age/gender groups. And so the idea with this is that you're going to let purchase optimization do the targeting work for you. And then Facebook algorithm with campaign budget optimization is going to distribute the budget to the best age/gender segment. So this works best when you have a lot of purchases on your pixel, because you're not going to do any interest or lookalike audience targeting, but you're going to rely on purchase optimization to pick out the right people for you. And this is what purchase optimization does. If you didn't know, it's going to look at your past purchase data. If you're optimizing for purchases, it's going to look at the past purchase data on your pixel, find people similar to that, and then target those people. And so even without any targeting at your ad set level, it's still going to pick out the right people using purchase optimization. And that's why you need to have a lot of purchases on your pixel before attempting this strategy. But I wrote here that it's worth trying earlier for general products. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a second. So how you want to set this up is you want to have five or 10 ad sets. So 5 ad sets if you're just splitting up by age groups, and then 10 if you're splitting up by gender as well. So for me, I didn't split up. For the one that I'm going to show you, I split up by age and gender. So I had 10 ad sets. So 18 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 plus. And then you duplicate this by 2, because I had all of these for men only and then all these for women only. And so this was my campaign with 10 ad sets. And let me show you an example of this. So this is a diagram showing how to set it up. So this, let's say that you're doing women only, right? So in this case, you'd only have 5 ad sets. And so this is what your campaign would look like. So campaign demos, a website conversions purchase campaign, your starting budget 20 times the profit target cost per purchase. And then ad set number 1 would just be 18 to 24 women. And then these countries, US, UK, Canada, Australia, or ePacket, no detailed targeting, right? You don't have to select any lookalikes or interests, automatic placements, and then 1-day click optimization if selling price under 50, otherwise default 70 click 1-day view. Then you want to exclude website visitors, purchase in the last 7 days, and website visitors in the last 7 days, purchasers in the last 30 days, because you don't want to target these people with your cold traffic campaigns. And then same thing for the rest of the ad sets, just the different ages, right? So 25, 34, 35 to 44, 45 to 54, and then 55 plus. That's all you do for this campaign, right? It's really broad targeting, and then you're letting purchase optimization do all the work. And then once again, you want to have multiple ads per ad set so that it can pick the best ones for that particular segment, right? The best ad for older women might not be the same best ad as for younger women, right? And so you want to have multiple ads per ad set and let Facebook pick. And so let me hop into Ads Manager, and I'm going to show you an example of this. All right, so I'm inside of the Cloud Cushion ad account, the Case Study 2.0 store, and I'm going to show you an example of this demos campaign. So I filtered by selection for just to see this campaign, and you can see this is a demos campaign as I was explaining. The daily budget right now is really low because it wasn't doing as hot anymore, and I scaled it down. I need to find new creative so that I can scale again. But you can see that while I was scaling, it was doing really well. 55,000 spent, 110,000 back. And let's take a look inside. So you can see that I had, this is exactly what I was showing you, right? I have the men and women ad sets, and then I have only 8. I don't have 10 different ad sets because I structured it a bit differently than I showed you in the slides. So the reason why I did it a bit differently is that this product is only for 35 plus. Like if you're under 35, it's unlikely that you're gonna want this product. This is just based on my testing. Like I've already tested this beforehand, before launching this demos campaign, and so there was no point in me like starting at like 18 to 24 and 25 to 34, and so I just started at 35. But you can see everything else is the same, right? 35 to 44 men and women, 45 to 54 men and women, 55 to 64 men and women, and 65 plus men and women. And then if we sort by the amount spent, you'll see that this is literally just like CBO is just going to like pick the best segments to spend on, and it seems that the older people are doing best, right? Because older men is what did the best out of all these different audiences. And yeah, I just let Facebook decide. I didn't pause anything. I paused these ones actually after a while because they weren't doing well at all. And so these are the only 2 that I paused. And then overall, this campaign is doing really well. And if I go inside, you'll see that I have multiple ads per ad set. So this is what I talked to you about cycling creatives, right? Right now I only have 3 active ads running, but you can see all the ads that I've cycled over time. And so yeah, that's what the demos campaign looks like, and I hope that makes sense. All right, so those are really the main scaling formulas that I use: top interest, demos, and super lookalikes. Those are the 3 formulas that I use. That's pretty much all I use to scale, and it works really, really well. And so that covers it for the scaling toolkit. But now I want to talk about increasing budget. So how do you actually scale these campaigns, right? I showed you how to set them up, but now how do you scale them? And so with your scaling campaigns, you scale just by increasing the campaign budget. You don't need to duplicate anything. You just increase the campaign budget when it's doing well. And you want to scale aggressively or conservatively based on how profitable you are. So if you're not profitable, you don't want to scale. If you're really profitable, you want to scale. So here are some guidelines for you. If a campaign is very profitable, over 30 to 40% net profit, you want to increase the budget by 50% every 2 days until you see a decline below this level, right? If the campaign is profitable, 20 to 30% net profit, then you want to increase by 20% every 2 days. So this is a more conservative approach, right? Your profit is good, but it's not like that crazy. So you don't want to risk messing it up. And so you're going to take a conservative approach to scaling, just increase it 20% every 2 days. Now, what about when it starts doing bad, right? So if profit is at or below your target, just leave it at the current budget, right? So if you're below like 20% profit, don't try to scale it, just let it be. And then when the performance actually starts to dip, so if you're starting to lose money, right? If the campaign performance drops significantly, then you want to drop the budget 33% every 2 days until the results balance out. Now, this is just an estimate, right? But if after 2-3 days, the performance doesn't start picking back up and it's doing bad, you want to lower the campaign budget gradually until you get it at a point where it can be profitable. And so if a campaign performance drops significantly, decrease budget every 2 days by around 33% until the results balance out. If a campaign performance drops just slightly, right? So like a slight drop over the last 3 to 7 days, then I would just decrease the budget about 15% every 2 days until the results balance out. So you only need to gradually scale it down to get back to profitability. You don't need to completely pause a campaign just because it's doing bad. If you lower the budget, the auction will get gradually less competitive. And so that's how you manage the budget. You just increase if it's doing well, you lower it if it's doing poorly. Now, I covered this already in the reading data lesson, but I wanted to bring it up just here because this is actually where it's the most applicable. So when you're scaling and you're making decisions about whether or not you should keep scaling or should you lower budget and so on, you need to look at least 3 days of data, and ideally like up to 7 days is good. So it depends how much you're spending, but if you're spending a lot, 3 days data. If you're spending decently, then look at like 7 days. Because you want to eliminate variance, and variance is essentially like randomness, right? And so you want to eliminate this because this is what your return on ad spend is going to look like over time. It's just fluctuations, right? It's going to go super well, then it's going to go poorly, then it's going to go super well. And so you need to average this out. You need to look at multiple days of data to make decisions. And also I wrote bad days get made up with for good days, right? So it's very common that like once every few weeks you're gonna wake up with like a very terrible day, right? Like your return on ad spend went from like 2 to like 1. That's usually just randomness. And so what you want to do is you just hold tight, don't panic, and it's gonna return to the mean. And if it doesn't, like if you wait like 2-3 days and it's still not going back up, then you can look at those last 3 days of data. Then you see, oh, the mean's going down. That means that, you know, there's a problem. Maybe my ads are getting exhausted or my audience is. But this is an important concept to understand, especially when you're scaling, just so that you don't panic. And so this slide here is very interesting. So this is basically summing up the entire ad account structure from, you know, testing and scaling. So the testing and scaling structure. And so this might be a little bit confusing, but let me explain what I mean. So you have, on one side, you have these sandbox campaigns, right? So you have creative sandbox. This is where you test ads, and you can have multiple creative sandbox campaigns. You don't need to just have one. I just put one on the diagram to keep things simple. So you have creative sandbox. You have your audience sandbox. This is where you're going to be testing a bunch of interest audiences, right? And so there's a double-sided arrow between these two, because you're going to use, for your audience sandbox, you're going to test them with the best creatives. And then for the creative sandbox, you're going to test it with the best audiences. And so you can kind of go back and forth between these two. And this is where you play around, test things, try to make something work. And so sandbox campaigns, I wrote here, 1 ad set per test, $10 to $20 campaign budget per ad set. Min ad set spend limit $5 to $10. You want to use spend limits for your sandbox campaigns to make sure everything gets testing data. You want to test creatives using your best audiences. You want to test audiences using your best creatives. And the optimization phase, the learning phase, doesn't matter in sandbox campaigns. You're not spending enough in sandbox campaigns for your ad sets to optimize. And so don't worry about optimization. It doesn't matter in these sandbox campaigns. You only want to worry about optimization here. And so at the bottom here, I have the scaling campaign. So these are the 3 types that I just covered: top interest scaling, super lookalike scaling, demo scaling. So these are your scaling campaigns here. And so what you want to do is you want to take the proven interests. You constantly want to be testing interests in here, right? Once interests start doing bad, you want to replace them from here. Proven interest ad sets go into your top interest scaling, right? And so this is how you keep this campaign fresh. And as you change your interests over time, this also changes the data for your lookalikes. And so with the creative sandbox, what you want to do is you want to always be testing creatives, and then you take the top creatives and you add them to all the scaling campaigns. And so this is essentially what your ad account structure looks like, summed up in one picture, right? You have the sandbox campaigns here, and you have the scaling campaigns here, and all the top creatives go into all of the scaling campaigns. Top interests go into the top interest scaling. And so here are just a few more notes about scaling campaigns. So you want to have 5 ad sets running per campaign at any time. So, you know, that's the sweet spot that I found, and I said 3 to 6 previously, but around 5 ad sets is usually what I do. Multiple ads per ad set, right? Higher budget allows for more ads. So if you're scaling aggressively, you can have like 6 to 12 ads per ad set, even more than that, and Facebook will pick the best ones. And so this is good because not all audiences are going to like react the same to ads, right? So by having multiple ads per ad set, you can let Facebook pick which ad is the most relevant to that specific audience, and it's gonna optimize that way. Now, you only want to use proven ads from the creative sandbox campaigns here, right? You don't want to test ads here, because when you add new ads to these campaigns, it resets the optimization. So that's not worth doing unless you've already tested that ad inside of a creative sandbox campaign and you know it's going to do well. And then at that point, you want to add it to these campaigns. Scaling, you just scale by increasing the campaign budget here as long as it's profitable. And you only you let these campaigns optimize and only reset the optimization when you find a new top creative. And when you do reset the optimization, it re-optimizes pretty fast because it's scaling campaigns, right? So you're spending a lot, it's getting a lot of data, and so it can optimize fast. And so that's the general ad account structure, right? This is what your ad account's going to look like overall if you follow my blueprint. All right, so that is it for this lesson about my scaling toolkit. I hope you enjoyed it and got a lot of value out of it, especially all the diagrams showing you how to set up the scaling campaigns. This is exactly how I do it, and so I hope that this clears it up for a lot of you, and I'll see you guys in the next lesson.